in South Africa. Other indigenous tribes did too, right? But the Zulus were the one that really did give the British a run for their money. However, in the documentary that I have about Shaka Zulu is this. They couldn't conquer Shaka Zulu. He was so powerful, and they dread him. The Europeans feared him. One word for dread is fear. They feared him terribly. So they had this indoor meeting, and they were planning out how we can really conquer South Africa by getting rid of Shaka Zulu. So one of the advisors, the war engineer advisors, right, said we should let loose our greatest weapon on Shaka Zulu. And that's how we're going to conquer South Africa. Now, several Caucasian men in the board meeting who was planning to conquer South Africa and to conquer Shaka Zulu, they said, what are you talking about, our greatest weapon? You telling me that Shaka Zulu is not aware of the cannon? That was the weapon back in those days, the most powerful weapon. That was the atomic bomb, the cannon. Like we have atomic bombs today? Well, that was it back in the days. So he said, you mean to tell me that Shaka doesn't know about a cannon, and we've got a cannon? And the gunpowder? That's what they ask. Our greatest weapon? And the individual proposer in the meeting, the Caucasian manipulator, he said, oh no, gentlemen, oh no, gentlemen. Yeah, the cannon and the gunpowder, yeah, that's one of our, those are some of our greatest weapons. But that's not the greatest weapon. So they all were amazed and awe, wondering what would be greater than the cannon and the gunpowder at that time. And so he said to them, our greatest weapon is the English language. Let us teach Shaka Zulu to speak English. In so doing, we will confuse him, and he, when he give orders to his generals, etc., they'll be so confused. So our greatest weapon is the English what? Language. Wow. Don't just, if you want to take Dr. Yates' word for it, of the story is fine. But if you want documented information, just write to me and request. Right? The documentary on the life of Shaka Zulu on DVD. Yeah. You'd be more than happy to learn about how it was planned. And so they send them mercenaries that they call missionaries into that particular area to reach Shaka Zulu. And in so doing, when they start teaching him to speak English, it worked. Why it worked? Because prior to Shaka Zulu learning English, he was speaking his own indigenous Kwankwa, which is pure and powerful. And his word was bond. Shaka Zulu was the word. Word meaning the law, the statutes. Yes, the command. Whatever he said was carried out. If Shaka said something to one of his advisors and he put it out, by the time it got to the 150, they call it 150 advisor, it was the same word. It never changed. Why? Because it was kept in a pure language, in a pure Kwankwa is the word here in this case, Kwankwa. In the pure Kwankwa. It never changed. And it was honored. In English, you say one thing to the person, pass it on, it changes. That's how confused the language is, and what we think we hear, and what we're not quite sure we hear, and all that. It's confusing. So, when Shaka now learned to speak English and he sent in command, they were all confused. And that caused the British to conquer here. Wow. Now you see why Dr. Yates teaches this math in Grasp-ish instead of English? Because when I was going to school, I learned math by the British first, and then later on by the Americans, in the confused language called English. So I couldn't get the math because the language was confusing. And since it was confusing, it was taught to me conceptually. So I couldn't get it. And when I started now studying math perceptionally, I realized this is best because it makes sense. Okay? So Grasp-ish is really making sense of the English nonsense. That's the Kwankwa, Grasp-ish. Now, I'm saying this to point out to you that in Graspology, linguistics is very important. When you study the etymology of word is the origin of the word, what the word was or is in that particular culture before it's brought over to English to start a confusion. Oh, you'll like this one. Here's a good example. Do you can now where the word God came from? What culture originally? Well, most people think that the word God is an English word. It's never been an English word originally. It was borrowed from another culture in Europe. What is the name of that culture or people that the English people borrowed the word God from and brought it into the Anglo-Saxon language known as English? That's a good question. If you still do, yeah, if you get into your Google it, you go Google whatever and look at the etymology of the word God. You'll be surprised to see what you learn about that word. Whether they spell it capital G, small o, small d, or common G, or common O, common D, doesn't matter. Still pronounce God. God is God. That's not a deception. Big deception. But we learn all that here in Graspology, especially when it comes to religions. These are some of the topics, all right? So we're looking at Graspmatyx is the first. Linguistics is very important because you learn about the origin of words. Now words are put together and what it meant originally in that culture. Along with that, you'll be learning Kwankwa Och. What's the word? Kwankwa Och. Kwankwa Och means languages. Kwankwa is the language, plural, Kwankwa Och. So what you're going to be learning is languages in this program. I teach several languages. And I also encourage others in this program to learn other languages. For example, languages like Amharic would be taught, Arabic would be taught, Ivrit will be taught, Swahili, of course, will be taught, Nihongo, which is Japanese, will be taught, Mandarin, which is they call in Chinese, called Chinese, but the language is called Mandarin, right, which is be taught. Tagalog, which is of the Philippines, will be taught. These are interesting languages to learn, because by learning this particular language, then you realize that, wait a minute, English is very confusing, and these other languages are richer, and they make much more sense. So it gives you, you put your mind to work. Your brain now starts functioning for you perceptionally instead of conceptually, and you're able to make a comparison, and you're able to see deceitfulness in the so-called language called English. So you're going to be learning other Kwankwa Och in this program, all right? Great. So we did linguistics of the Kwankwa Och with languages. Etymology, there it is. Etymology is really the study of ethnic groups of people. If you're going to study a people, obviously it's best to study their spirituality and their Kwankwa. Because by doing that, you get into the psyche and the mind of the person. You're able to understand why they behave a certain way. Why it is in Ethiopia, in Habesha, they call it Ethiopia or Ethiopia, the people take their hand, put it over the heart, and then greet you. And say tenastilin. They don't say hello. Why they say tenastilin instead of hello? Why they say Xavier Yimesken? Why they say salamna? Interesting. Why they do not call the creator God, but they say Xavier. Xavier. Why they say that? Interesting in the culture. Very, and remember, it is said Ethiopia is a cradle of civilization. We learn a lot of and from Ethiopia. Oh, or Habesha. I like the word Habesha. Habesha is a word being used before Ethiopia, and the language is Amarania, used before Amharic, and you're talking about Abyssinian. Yeah. So these are good terminology to use. However, so etymology has to do with the study of a people. And we learned that. Geography is a study of, I like to call it Globology. Globology, right? Right. Because a lot of people are not aware that the word geo means earth, right? And graphy means to be as in photograph, as in to look at the planet in a photographic way of seeing it, like countries, places, oceanology, what's below the ocean, what's in it. You can study the environment. It's a study of the environment, right, globally. That's why I like the word globology best. Political science is very important. Political, oh, this is so necessary. Because we buy into this European-American concept of politics and thinks the whole world governs that way. And it does not, and that's a deception. Here it goes again. European and Americans, the way we project to the world, I think the world is governed this particular way. It does not. Okay? There's no, all countries do not have Republican and Democrat. It's not run that way. But the idea of Republican and Democrat came out of Rome and Greece. The Greeks are the Democrats and the Romans are the Republican. And those are Eurocentric, manipulative, political concept of governing the world. So when you study all that, you study political science, you learn indeed about what makes the Greeks Greeks, what makes the Persians and the Medes and Persians who they are, what makes the Babylonians Babylonians, you know, what make the Hebrew people and the governance based on what's written, what make the Nubians Nubians, what make the Dogon people Dogons, right? You know, you're learning about how they govern, right? And you see the difference with how they govern based on the Western world. Indonesia, Malaysia, those other countries, part of the world.